Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Once Upon a TV Time. I am your host, Marine Perot, and I invite you to come with me as we travel back in time to relive some of the greatest episodes of television. On each episode of this podcast, I chat with someone who worked on the shows that we discuss. Writers, directors, crew members, actors, you name it. They are here to talk about what makes great TV and to tell us about the behind the scenes of the episodes they were involved in. For this first episode of Once Upon a TV Time, I'm taking you back to a show that is very dear to my heart because I grew up watching it. And depending on when you were born, you may or may not recognize its opening credits.
They said a woman doctor could not survive alone on the new frontier. But I won't give up. And I'm not alone anymore. I've inherited a family. And that may be the biggest challenge of all.
This is the voice of Jane Seymour over the title credits of Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, a show created by Beth Sullivan in 1993. It aired on CBS for 6 seasons, followed by 2 TV movies that were made after the show was cancelled. Dr. Quinn also aired in over 100 countries, including France, where I'm from, and gathered several Emmys, Golden Globes, and other awards throughout its run. But out of the 150 episodes of Dr. Quinn, which one can we possibly talk about today, and who will tell us about it? Well, there are many good ones if you ask me, but I'd like to start with the beginning. So let's go all the way back to the pilot episode, which originally aired on January 1st, 1993. And to discuss it with me, I have none other than the creator of Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, Beth Sullivan. Beth, welcome and thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, I'm happy to. Thank you.
So now, before we tackle the pilot, I'd like to ask you about the genesis of the show. As I mentioned, it's the early 90s. On TV at the time, there's Melrose Place, Mad About You, Home Improvement, and big hits are on the horizons like The X-Files, Lois and Clark, NYPD Blue, and Frasier. So a drama set in the Old West and centered on a female character seems like a bit of a gamble at the time.
It was. It definitely was. It was a very unique situation that probably doesn't arise very often, if at all. I had done television movies, long form writing, all through the 80s. And in 89, I had 2 that were very successful on the same time. One was on NBC and one was on CBS. And the president of the network at the time, Jeff Sagansky, was approached to do a series with Sharon Gless, who had been Cagney on Cagney and Lacey. And she wanted to do a solo series, and they had a pitch of an idea, she and her executive producer husband. And he said, great, let's do it. And they said, well, we need somebody to create it. And that's where he suggested me. And ironically, I had not done 1 hour at that point. I had only done 2 hour, long form. And he said, well, I've got the perfect person because it's a legal thing. And she just did this, and it was a great legal, it was great success. So he married me up with that. And I got a call from my agent saying, Jeff wants you to do a pilot in a series. I said, what? I don't do that. Well, he says, well, he wants you to. I said, okay, yeah, great. All right. So I did it. He said, well, I want you to do this thing for Sharon Gless. So created a thing called Trials of Rosie O'Neill, the Trials of Rosie O'Neill. It was on a couple seasons. I only did the first season because it was too unpleasant for me to work with her husband, who his idea of executive producing was not my idea of executive producing, but I was only the showrunner. I only ran the writing table and the creative part of that. So I just got very tired of, standing up for defending a lot of people who got screamed at and stuff. And I just didn't like the style and the atmosphere. So I went in at the end of it and I said, Jeff, I hope you don't mind, but I really don't want to do a second season of this with him. And he said, no, that's okay. Because I said, I'll do it if you need me to do it to keep the show, whatever. For you, I'll do it. But he said, no, you don't have to. He said, we don't really want to do another season with him either. So I said, oh, well, okay. And I said, well, fine, I'll just go back and do it. But he said, no, don't do it. Make another series. Do another series. You're good at this. I said, you think so? He said, yeah, create one of your own. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, well, what about? He says, oh, no, I don't do that. Yeah, so you pitched to me, and I said, well, all right, what do you need? And he said, and probably the last person in Hollywood to say this in the television business, he said, I need an 8 o'clock family drama. And that was the very last breath of that kind of thinking in network, because 8 o'clock became the lust for, reality shows. That's it, reality shows. So he said that, and I said, oh, well, that's interesting. I mean, I can do it. I can do whatever, I said, so in fact, I have an idea. I've always wanted to do something set at the end of the Civil War, because women came out of that conflict with very much disappointment that they did not get the vote. And they were pissed off, and they went and did a lot of daring things, like just force themselves into schools and occupations and stuff. And I said that I'd like to do something about a woman at that point doing something along those lines. He said, whatever, go ahead, So, and then he said, well, there's no period pieces on television right now. He said, so it's kind of a gamble, but if you believe in this, I said, yeah, I think it'll be a hit. And I said, program it though on Saturday night, make it a family event. Make it something that the whole family can watch together at 8 o'clock. Okay. And that's your whole point of an 8 o'clock show, right? He says, absolutely. I said, okay. And so he gave me full free reign. And that's just sort of unheard of in terms of, I'm sure it happens a lot, but it was very unique in that, rare. It's not all the time, that's for sure, that you just have someone tell you and do whatever you want,
Especially said, at that time.
Yes, especially, yeah. And me being, the female, women hadn't broken through the glass ceiling at that point. I would be the first woman to executive produce a 1-hour drama successfully. So, that was sort of pathetic, but there it was. When people told me that, I said, well, that's shame on this business, It's not going to accomplish so much as it's just a shame on the status quo.
It was also on your own. You were the sole executive producer of Dr. Quinn.
Totally on my own. In fact, with much opposition. Everybody was trying to make sure I'd fail and to shoot me down. I'm not saying that in a mean way. It's just that everyone assumed they knew better than me that it could not be done, and that I was not going to be able to do it. And I said, just watch, look, it's going to happen, because I'm totally dedicated. And I really dedicated every minute of 24 hours a day to making that thing happen for 3 years. The pitching and the getting it going and getting a story and getting the script, and then finally out of the script, having enough people love the script, the writing, to nudge him to make the pilot, because it wasn't his cup of tea. It really wasn't. He made no bones about that. And but he gave it a go to pilot, and which was very generous of him. And I just, knocked myself out. I said, well, I'm making a pilot. I said, he said, do you want a 1 hour? He asked me, actually, the last thing out in the meeting. He said, by the way, do you want an hour pilot or 2 hour? I said, oh, 2 hour. Any writer would choose more time to establish, everything and make people fall in love. So I was writing a 2 hour, basically. I think he said it so easily because maybe he thought, well, if it doesn't work, I can just blow it off as a movie, But anyway, so for whatever reasons, I got a 2 hour pilot, and then that pilot in May, before May actually, but that pilot back east in New York, where they do all the testing. And that was where that department of the network was, and also the final say, the owner of CBS was in New York, and they said, oh, well, but the testing is incredible. I said, really? Oh, well, that's great. No, you don't understand. The testing is off the Richter scale, beyond anything they've ever seen. They tested it twice to make sure that something wasn't wrong. I said, well, I'm not surprised. I think it's people have been hungry for something like this, and it's just not there. And when they find it, they go, wow, So cool. I'm really happy about that. And they said, yeah, well, it's keeping this thing alive, otherwise it would just be disappeared. But because it had got that testing at the upfront, when it came time to set the schedule, it wasn't on there. And I'm told by someone in the meeting that Tish himself, Lawrence Tish, who owned the network, at the last minute went up, took the 8 o'clock thing on Wednesday night off and put it there. And just without saying anything. And then at the last minute, and he got, we got the minimum order of 6 episodes. And so, but we were diligently making all the first 6 episodes, which, turned out to be ones that people really cared about. But he wasn't liking them that much. And so after, I don't know what, I guess the lukewarm response made me worry about having only 6 episodes. And someone suggested to me, they said, well, you should go to New York and ask them for more episodes. Let them see what you're doing. And I said, really? Can I go over his head? I mean, that's crazy, or around him. And they said, yeah, if you tell him and he's okay with it. I said, okay. So I told him, I said, Jeff, do you mind if I go to New York and see if I can't talk them into more episodes? He said, go ahead. If you can do it, go, feel free. I think he didn't think I had a chance, but I don't know, maybe he did. But anyway, so I went back to New York and met with these people. David Poltrack had done all the testing. That was the beginning of his validity of testing being taken so seriously. It helped to see me in person, I think, that they were thinking. And I had I was 40 at that point. And I had done serious study of film and everything since I was 22,
Mm-hmm.
and I did film school, and then I was an executive at Fox and a reader first, then an executive at development. And then I said, well, I can write. Why don't I just do that, And so I started writing and then producing some of this, what I was doing. So it just kind of rolled along. And my attorney, who was a very hot shit attorney, pardon my French, in the business. He was one of the best entertainment attorneys, and he had a hell of a time getting them to accept my sole credit, executive producer thing up front, sole card, and then the Fade to Black, created by Beth Sullivan.
Really?
It was a big. If they resisted, they said no woman's ever had it. Just a solo, and we're not into setting precedents because we'll get flooded with. And they said, well, you bet. He just said, he held his ground and said, well, this is a precedent, so you have to set it, because that's the only way she'll do it. And there was a lot of tension because they said, well, then we'll just replace her. And he was a very charming guy, and he got where he did by being tough and good at what he did, but also by being about the most charming person doing it in town. And he managed to say to them, that's not a good thing. You really want her on this. She is it. Somebody else is not going to be able to walk in and do this. And he convinced them of that. And so finally they said yes. And so I got the credit and all that. And he said, here's what you're going to have to do. He said, to get that, you're going to have to give up any kind of equity with a man who would get whatever he pay that the guy would get to do this. And I said, well, that was a given. So if at least I get the credit, I know they were going to give me a hard time about money anyway, because they always do. Women were at that point making anywhere from a half to 2/3 of what men were for the same exact job. And there's still problems in that. But so I said, well, I'll take the hit on that. Just, and I'm happy to do it for X amount in fact, that was part of what helped me to get the title stuff, was the saying that I would do it for less for the first 2 years. I made a very low deal for the first 2 years. And I said, but if it's rated, and if it's a hit in the 3rd season, I want it to go to this, and this. I had the 3rd, 4th, 5th, all mapped out. And he said, that's reasonable to ask. He said, they don't think it's going to be a success at all. So he said, I don't think I'm going to have any problem putting this over. So he did it. And sure enough, it was all in writing once it happened. So yeah.
And how wrong were they?
They were a little wrong. Yeah. Thank goodness. Yeah.
I was born on February 15th, 1833, in Boston, Massachusetts. I was the last of 5 children, the 4 before me all girls. My father, being a man of science, firmly believed that the odds would finally dictate the birth of a long-awaited son. He would be named Michael. I was named Michaela. I was determined to attend medical school, but none would admit women. I finally received my MD from the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania.
The pilot, like you said, is quite unique in the sense that it's a 2-hour pilot, an hour and a half of runtime. So that's pretty chunky for a first episode. I want to talk about the fact that it covers a lot of grounds. We start with Michaela leaving Boston, and then she arrives in Colorado Springs, only to find out that everyone there was expecting a male doctor. Then not only does she struggle to find a way to fit in, but then her only friend gets bitten by a snake and dies, and she ends up having to care for 3 children. I mean, it's a lot, but it lays out the grounds for the entire show, doesn't it?
Yep, it had to do that. I had it 7 years in mind. I mean, I like, well, if it goes, you have to plan ahead and know what you're going to be doing and what you want to say. And my whole underpinning was to illuminate the history of what was done to the Native Americans, and also at the same time, women at that time. I thought, well, it's a parallel story, and I can do both. And but that was very important to me. So I knew where we were going, had a vision, and I laid out all the stuff that we would need. I mean, all the characters are there that, I mean, we introduced a few characters way later on, but basically there was 12 characters were introduced to regular people in the pilot.
Do you have any fond memories of filming that pilot?
Oh, yes, lots. I mean, there's crazy, horrible memories too. It was really hard work, freezing cold, and we were flooded out twice. We were shut down. Yeah, by flash floods. We were shut down twice. And one of them was so serious that the river overflowed into our parking area, and the whole parking area became this massive, wide river, and parts of it were running very fast, and some of it was getting very deep, and it was sort of scary. And Jane was in. I said, "Get her out of here! Get her out of here!" I'm screaming from up by the thing, and her driver was driving, and the water just kept rising, and suddenly the car started to float, and it was floating backwards downstream. I went, "Oh my God! Sink the car, open the door, sink it so that it'll stop moving and we can get her out of there." And it was very dramatic and true to the series itself. Who at the moment we really needed to get her up and out of that limo, Joe zooms up in his truck and pulls her up and into his truck, and they drive off. And I went, well, that's sort of perfect, okay.
Very Sully of Lando to do that.
Yeah. And we said, well, we waved, and apparently that's when, well, Jazz Jane tells it now, that's when they went off, and that's when their whole relationship started. The romantic part.
Yeah.
They went and got dry somewhere.
Yeah, romance, in the rain. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So speaking of Jane and Joe, one of my favorite moments in the pilot is not exactly how Michaela and Sully meet, but more what happens after. So she needs a place to stay, and he has a homestead that he's not using. So he takes her to this shack in the middle of nowhere, and he just lives there. He just leaves her there. And I love it because it shows from the get-go that Sully can tell that this is a woman that can fend for herself and is not going to be told what to do.
And that he sees that in her. Yeah. She's not just some little lady out there that's helpless, and he leaves her there, not thinking that she's gonna. You're right. He doesn't leave her there to perish. He leaves her there because he knows she'll manage. Yeah.
From the very beginning, it's very interesting to see how that relationship is like. He didn't need a lot to understand who she was,
but and vice versa. It was supposed to be that kind of magical, once or maybe twice in a lifetime person that you meet, and that it's just you fall in love instantly and with everything about them, mm-hmm. And that fantasy thing, but there it is, and it does create certain feelings that are intense. I wanted that. I wanted true love.
And it's interesting to see how it progress throughout the season as well. And then another one of my favorite scenes. I mean, favorite. It's a little hard to watch, but I love the scene where Michaela goes to visit Jake's barbershop to get his opinion on a fake toothache. And he pulls out a perfectly healthy tooth from her mouth, and it's painful to watch. But it serves a purpose.
Doing that, her guts to do that was a turning point, definitely.
Yeah. So what was your intention there? Is it to show that she is as tough as a man, that she she was tough in her intention, that she wasn't going anywhere, that she was determined, and that she was going to do it, and they weren't going to push her out. She was determined to stay and prove something to herself
and to the town and
Mm-hmm.
to, society, if you will. Yeah.
And then that as we follow that moment a little later on in the pilot, there's also something else that's brought up about that character is that she doesn't really see herself as a woman, or not. At least that's not first how she identifies. Because there's that iconic line where she goes to Hank's saloon and he tells her no lady here, and he says I'm no lady. She says I'm no lady. I'm a doctor.
Yeah, yeah. I never knew it was. I didn't at the time. I didn't think it was going to be a line that people remembered. But looking back, I should have, because it is, it is one of those kind of lines, and people have spoofed it, of course. I mean, people have done everything about it, but yeah, it was. I wanted to make that point that for women not to be seen just for their sex, but for who they were in the world, what they did in the world, the same as men. That was, the point of that, definitely.
Can you tell me a bit about casting Jane in that role?
Well, that was the only role that not the only role, but there were two roles that the network really cast for me. And I was looking at actresses for for the role of Michaela. And there were a couple of named television actresses that it boiled down to, and I had chosen one of them in my mind, and I went into a meeting to see Jeff Sagansky, the president, and tell him who I chose. I said, well, I chose this person. And he leaned back in his chair and he said, "What do you think about Jane Seymour?" I said, "Jane Seymour? We haven't talked about Jane Seymour." He says, "Yeah, but her agent just called me like a little while ago, and she's willing to do. She's really in terrible straits right now. Her husband bankrupted her and has done a terrible thing and left her alone. Left her and run off with some woman." He says she's really in a bad way and she needs a movie right now. That's what her agent said. And he said, I told him I don't have a movie right now, but I have a 2-hour pilot right now. But she'd have to sign the papers that commit to doing the pilot, and to doing the series if it happens. And so her agent said, okay, she will do it. And she did it. They signed all the stuff and they told me, go pick her up. I mean, it was literally that was at 5:30 and at 9:30, the deal was done. And they told me to go pick her up at her photographer's house. She was staying there. And so I did. I went up to Beverly Glen and got her and took her to the Bel Air Hotel and got her a suite and put her in there and said, get some rest, because it starts, have to be in fittings tomorrow. She had to be in fittings for her costumes the next day, and then the day after that was shooting at 5:30 in the morning in Pasadena. The first scene was the funeral of her father.
Wow.
In an old house in Pasadena, and which was good. She had a cold and was kind of runny nose, and she was she used it definitely to, in the preparation. It was really incredibly instructive to watch her prepare, though. I was just waiting in the wings just nearby. She couldn't see me. She was into her own preparation, standing at the hot coffin. And I realized what she was doing later. I realized she's making herself cry now because she realizes that when the scene opens, she's been crying. She's been sobbing over her father. And she wants to make it look like she's been crying. I think, wow, yeah, that's incredibly great. She's standing there weeping, and then doing all that before the scene, and then the scene starts, and it was really wonderful. It was just great to see that come alive. To her open her mouth and go, "Oh my God, this is what it is." Because I always said that that it was a 50-50 proposition in terms of who was most important in terms of the creative aspect. I said 50-50. I did the first part, and then Jane breathed a life into it that was her own, and brought some great things to that character and made it iconic. So
yeah.
In that meeting, he said, "What do you think of Jane Seymour?" And I remember exact my words. I said, "Jane, oh my God!" I said, "Well, I think she's beautiful, and I think she can act, and we'd be lucky to have her." And he said, "Well, you can have her if you want." I said, "Great." And that was that.
And so another pivotal moment for Jane's character in the pilot, after the death of her father, comes later on, but it's Charlotte's death, because that's going to be the anchor of the show, right? It gives Michaela a family and a real reason to stick around Colorado Springs.
Yeah. I knew there had to be more motivation than just her digging her heels in about being a doctor. And the more, well, as a good dramatist, you're always looking to load any story with as much conflict and problems that the person has to overcome. That's what drama is a person, basically confronting obstacles to a dream of some kind or a goal. And so I put as many in her way as I could. And she was, character, had to grapple with all of it. And that was the essence of it, basically
Yeah.
seeing someone struggle against all the opinions and prejudices, and at the same time identify with people who are doing likewise, the Native Americans.
And she also, like, not only now does she have to fight the fight of being accepted in this town, but she also has to be accepted by those children that she just adopted. Can you tell me a bit about like building that family dynamic where at first the kids they're not really sure about it?
Yeah, no, they think she's, first of all, she's this kooky woman that everyone's reacting to badly. So kids usually play off of other people's reactions to someone, and they see what is going on. The only person who reacted positively, though, was their mother, which is something. And they realized that their mom did in fact say this to this person, and if she indeed willed them to her care, there must have been a reason. And I always thought that was an underpinning of why they were able to come to grips with it, as not as quickly, because I didn't make it quick, but as steadily as they did. And it was easier with the young, with Brian, because Brian was so young. And can I call you Ma too? That was basically, he wanted just to find a mom. I mean, he loved his mother, his real mother, but she was gone, and tragically and traumatically. So he needed a mom. They needed, the essence of that relationship was they all needed each other. They needed each other. She needed them to find out how to live, and they needed her to live. I mean, in different ways.
That's true. I don't know if she would have survived on her own in that shack if nobody was cooking for her.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So then, like I said, the pilot covers a lot of grounds. It's months of story told, and it kind of culminates towards the end of the third act with Black Kettle being shot and needing Dr. Mike's help. And we see her perform a tracheotomy. Yep. And it's one of the first procedures we see her do. I mean, when I say see, we don't see that much.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah.
It's the 90s.
We shot it very cleverly so that it gave a lot of the drama of blood in there, but you never really saw that much of it. Yeah.
Yeah. How much research did you do into like the medical procedures of the time period when you wrote the show?
Oh,
like,
a lot.
Yeah,
a lot. I was very interested in it, and for the actual series, once it got going, we contracted with a consultant from the Smithsonian, a medical historian, and he checked all of our scripts for accuracy.
Nice.
And also suggestions. He made a lot of suggestions. Well, you could do this. And that year, this came in, and they actually had oh yeah, great. So we found out a lot of things from him, and he verified things, or else nixed things. No, this didn't exist yet, or whatever. We had at least a way of knowing that we were telling the truth.
Yeah. What is your favorite part about the pilot?
Oh, my favorite part about the pilot. Favorite scene or favorite aspect, or let me think.
Whichever you prefer.
I mean, the scene that I think sticks in my mind is silly, and it does probably everybody, is her taking that fall straight into the mud. She did it so great. I mean, she was completely, I said, Jane, we only have one shot with this because we don't have another dress, and we don't have a duplicate. And she said, don't worry, I'll get it. And whenever she said that, it was always true. So I felt very good about, like, oh, wow, she'll get it. And she just went for it. She went full on, and it was wonderful. And I that moment I went, oh, she's so game to do this. She was totally in it. She threw all of her human soul and energy into it. She was just the right time for her. And it ironically was the right time for both of us to be doing what we were doing. And it was just a really blessed pairing of talent,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talked about casting Jane. How did casting Joe Lando go?
Oh, that was a good story, because I hadn't even gotten to the concept of doing Sully. I said, oh, I was hung up on the kids and this and that, and I was always picking, of the two finalists that the network and I would agree on, I was always picking the wrong one, in quotes, because I would say, well, I like this one, and the network would like the other one. I go, well, basically what I did is I just held my ground. I said, look, I kind of have lived with these characters a long time. Just trust me. This is the person that's going to do it, And a lot of them were very quirky choices. Like Helen Udy was brand new into town, or a very inexperienced professionally actress. And my casting director happened to see her in some little showcase thing. And he came in and he said, we were considering people with names for that, and names like in the business. And I said, after I saw her do the reading, I said, well, yeah, that Helen, she just haunts me. It's like she is Myra in my mind. And he said, well, if she is, do it, And I said, people are going to yell if I do, I said, he said, so what? So I said, I want this one. They said, well, are you crazy? Anyway, so I picked the people who I felt in my soul were the characters the best. And it worked, it worked. Joe, my friend, I was friends with the woman who was head of casting at CBS, Lisa Freiberger, and she is a wonderful person. And she called me one day and said, we were having lunch actually out, and she said, I think of somebody that's really perfect for that Sully role. I said, oh, well, that's good, because I haven't even thought about that. Who do you think? She said, there's this guy who does a soap in New York, who I think he has that look, he has that long hair, and he's sexy, and he smolders, and and I think he'd be the perfect guy for it. I said, well, I trust you. You're a great casting, person, and I trust you completely. And I said, okay, I just let her cast in essence. And I don't think he didn't read or anything. I just, I saw some film on him, and I said, yeah. I said, even if he's not wonderful in the part, he's got all the qualities that, if he's in the scene, it'll be right. It'll work. So yeah, I just took a flyer based on my friend's commitment to the fact, and she was right. He was great.
Yeah, and then it worked, and they were perfect together.
Exactly. Yes, that was a blessing. That was an extra added treat. That who knows how often you get people who really are literally attracted to one another and literally have that chemistry. And it did magically. I mean, from day one. I remember, Jane, at one point, very early in the shooting, you were standing out waiting for something to happen. Well, you're always waiting. Making movies is hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
So we're standing there waiting for somebody, lighting setup or something. And she leans over and kind of whispers in my ear. She says, "Why did you have to pick someone so great? So fabulous, so attractive?" And I said, "Well, that's good, isn't it?" She said, "Well, yes, sort of. It's good for the part, but so, it's hard on me." I said, "Well, just do what you need to do, and I said, "You're not married. You're not beholden to anybody. You're not cheating on anybody." And to our knowledge, he wasn't either. So yeah. So I said, don't worry about it. Just live it.
Yeah.
And so I, in essence, gave her permission to live it, but she didn't need my permission. But she kind of wanted the encouragement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one other thing I'd like to talk about regarding the pilot, like I said, it aired on January 1st, and then second episode aired like the next day. But there are big differences between the pilot and the rest of the series in terms of casting.
Oh, there were, yes. Well, yeah, there were people that I lost on a couple of people. I fought for a lot of everybody. And I lost on Lauren Bray's character. I lost on the barber, because they had a contract of some kind with Cole Meany, who just done a movie out of Ireland that was very popular, an indie film that was getting a lot of attention, and his name was being heard a lot. So they said, "Oh, we've got Cole Meany to do this, so that's what we want." So they cast Cole Meany in that, and then they said, "Get somebody for the Lauren role." And I did my best. I wanted Orson from the get-go. They thought he was too quirky and strange and not right for the part. They had trouble with both the children, except for the only one they didn't have trouble with was Brian, of course, Sean. And let's see, who else? It was
Robert E.
Robert E. Yes, Robert E. Well, that wasn't their problem. They basically gave me free reign on that. But my friend, who I went to film school with, was Henry Sanders, and I wanted him to play that part. Yeah. And he was back east. He was in Georgia or someplace doing a play that he had a commitment to. And when I called and I said, listen, I've got this pilot and we're just going to shoot it. He said, oh, I'm in the play. The play's still going. I can't leave. I said, listen to me, Henry. I said, this is for a series and a series, and everyone in the world as an actor wants to get cast on a great series and have it run for 7 years. And he said, yeah, but, it's just a pilot at this point. Most pilots don't get picked up. I said, this one will. And he said, oh, well, you can't really say that. And anyway, we went back and forth. He said, I just can't leave these people hanging. I said, well, I admire your loyalty and all that, but on some level, I was saying, what about me? Be loyal to me. But anyway, I was trying to usurp that, but it was just wanting what I wanted, So I said, all right, I'll cast somebody else. But then when it came time, I still wanted him. And somebody said, aren't you mad that he didn't do the pilot? I said, no, I'm not mad. It doesn't, I can have him now, which is great, and he'll be wonderful. And he was. Indeed.
Yeah, I feel like at the time you could kind of get away with recasting people like that. Now audiences might like frown a little bit more, but in the 90s it was fine.
Yeah. Even Jessica, that was everybody said, well, you've got to kill the character now. You've got to die and create a new character. I said, absolutely not. I am not letting this little girl walk away with my character. No way.
Yeah.
I'm just not, because she's petulantly listening. Well, I mean, it was not her fault that her father filled her head with all kinds of crap and made her argumentative and, anyway, so I just said, well, that's that. If she's going to leave, go, let her go. And I'm going to recast a new Colleen. Everyone said, oh, no, you can't do that. I said, yes, I can. Watch. People will accept. If you say it's Colleen and people call her Colleen and she says, I'm Colleen, she'll be Colleen very quickly. Yeah. And sure enough, and everyone can have an opinion about which one they like the best and probably will till the day they die. That's their problem. But she's going to be wonderful in her own right. And everyone will really realize that. And it's sure enough, I had faith in people,
And it worked out in the end.
Yes, indeed.
Now, before we close this episode, I can't let you go without asking about the reboot idea you've had for this show.
Oh, well, my daughter helped me. I have a lot of trouble writing alone at this point because I had a brain injury. So she worked with me on a reboot and helped it get laid down and written. On the third draft, I thought we really hit it. It's a wonderful piece that picks up all the feeling of the original, but without being a direct copy or anything. It picks up where it's not a reboot. It's not saying this is a different version of it. It's really all of them 25 years later. And with the children grown up and having strong stories of their own. The main subplot of that was that Robert E.'s and Grace's son, who we named Xander, is come back from law school and coming into town. In fact, that's what it opens with the train arriving and people are getting off. He gets off and he's riding with it happens to be Dr. Quinn, who's coming back from some other thing up in Denver. Anyway, but he's falls in love with Katie. They fall in love. So it's an interracial, thing, and it's a big, horrible conflict because even Michaela and Sully don't want it to happen because they're afraid they'll get killed. Like literally hung that, I mean, if a crowd got a hold of them, they would hang them, for
my goodness, it is crazy because I've never heard this before. Like I had no idea what was the idea for this pilot, but funny enough, for some reason, a few years ago, I wrote down some ideas for a reboot. I had rewatched the whole show. I was like, hey, what would this show be like now? And I wrote that they would, I swear, I'm not making this up. Yeah, I wrote a story that would be Michaela's daughter, Katie, having a relationship with Robert E. and Grace's son, and that being an issue.
Got pregnant at the same time. It only made sense that there would be these two adult children, later. Grace is pregnant. She was pregnant. Let's do that. Let's get them together.
And in my mind, it would be an issue. I had an idea where it would be an issue for Robert E. and Grace. Like they wouldn't want it.
No, they wouldn't want it. They didn't want it. That's what it is, that it freaked them out too because it made them, all in danger, mortally, and they were too worried that a horrible thing was going to happen. And
that is so funny. I'm glad now that I'm like, I was on the right track.
you had a feel for the show, obviously.
So whatever happened with that idea? Like, because I know last I heard about it was like 2020.
We pitched it, Jane and I I got a big producer friend who owns a big company, what's called a guarantee, a company that comes in and does the production and guarantees the budget and all that, and they do everything. And he's got a big company like that in Vancouver, and where we wanted to shoot, and we brought him into the mix, and she and I and he formed a limited partnership to formally and legally go out as a team. And we did. And then we pitched it first to CBS out of politeness. We said, we're here because, we feel, beholden to give you a first opportunity to do the right thing. If you're smart enough. I did that if you're smart enough part, I didn't say out loud, but
yeah.
They'd listen to the whole thing and said, no, we're just not interested. And I said, really, why? I said, because I see this as like a huge amount of money being laid on the ground in front of you, and you just are saying you're not inclined to pick it up, and that puzzles me. Well, we think it's just a bit dusty.
Oh,
and that was the only explanation they gave us. I said, dusty? He said, yeah, dusty. And I said, oh, okay. And it was like very tense, and we all left, and we got out in the hall, and Jane and I looked at each other, dusty, what the fuck, Right. So it was very insulting, and we then went to a couple places else that were the best options, that were thought to be the next best possibilities, and both of them turned us down. And after 3 turn downs, we said, well, I guess it's not going to happen. We said, well, we should just wait. Maybe we can, a different time, a different people, different executives, and that's kind of where we're even still thinking about that vaguely now, And actually, the person who's really come to our aid in that whole thing is William Shockley, has been making movies independently as a producer and star of them for a while with a company, with a production studio, a new studio called Redbud. And he's been successfully making these low budget features. And he came to me and said, why don't we just do it as a feature? I said, oh, okay. And so that's something that I'm working on with some help at this point. Obviously, like I said, I can't do it myself, but I'm working on that with some help, but to get a script that he can then hand to them and show them and say, well, here, we're going to do it as a feature. So maybe there'll be a knockdown, drag out, independent, feature of Dr. Quinn.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. It's on me right now to finish a script that he likes enough to give to them.
Yeah.
So
well,
I'm trying.
I will keep looking forward to the possibility.
Okay. All right. Me too. I mean, it would be fun to stand in those shoes again and watch filming and see things happening, and also to get everybody back together. It would be wonderful. I mean, there's no town to go back to, but that place is in all of our hearts. It was really home for all of us. A wonderful, happy home. That was what was incredible about it. It was a really happy place.
It's the end of this first episode of Once Upon a TV Time. Thank you so much for listening. Beth, thank you for agreeing to come down memory lane with me and taking some time out of your schedule to talk about Dr. Quinn.
Glad to do it.
Folks, I will be back next month with a new episode of Once Upon a TV Time and a new guest. Stay tuned. Follow this podcast on social media for all the details, and also on your favorite podcasting platform. And until then, go watch some television.